Hello, hello. Welcome to Adobe Live. I'm joined by the one and only Tim Möbest. How you doing?
I am very excited. First of all, you got that umlaut perfectly. Really,
Brilliant.
very proud of you. Had a lot of time to practice, I think. Yes, I'm doing great because today it's a wonderful day. Because every day is a wonderful day when you're on Adobe Live, but it's even better because I get to talk about my favorite thing besides Audition, which is expressions in After Effects.
Excellent. So welcome to Adobe Live. If you're familiar around here, you'll recognize that once again I am in a different setup. So I'm once again streaming from a hotel room. This time I'm in Bangkok, and you may be interested by the background. We've got a train that comes through here, which is very exciting. So there's a little bit of extra visual interest there. If you get a little bit distracted. But anyway, welcome to Adobe Live. There it is, yeah. If you want to join in with the chat, and we've got plenty of people in the chat already. So good afternoon to Oliver, Stephen, Stuart, Linda, Mike, Sean, and some other people. Welcome to Adobe Live. If you want to join with the chat, you can join us on behance.net. If you want to carry on watching on YouTube, that's fine. But if you want to join with the chat, we'll be monitoring over on Behance. So Tim,
yeah,
After Effects and expressions, and maybe some facial expressions and other things. This is close to my heart. I do a lot of After Effects coding and expressions and other stuff. So I'd be interested to know what your crash course is, and let's buckle up, seatbelts on, and.
Well, first of all, it's very important to mention that we only have an hour today, and in an hour you can't really do a deep dive into too many different expressions, especially if this is your first time perhaps opening After Effects, or if you have opened it before. If this is your first time using expressions, then so yeah, if this is your first time, then don't worry, we won't do too complicated tips and tricks today. However, I still think they will be very useful for your workflow, even if you are scared by expressions and just the word. Like I was when I first opened After Effects. I was even scared by keyframes. And now they're my best friend and only friend.
After Effects probably is one of the most intimidating applications to first open.
Oh boy.
I think it's probably fair to say that a lot of people who come into creative software probably go through something like Photoshop first, and then that's maybe a little bit intimidating. You get used to it and everything, and then from there you can maybe move on to like Illustrator and other stuff. But After Effects, it just throws everything out the window and just it looks scary. So hopefully we can break down those barriers. Get on board with it, because it's a lot of fun.
Yes.
There's a lot of creativity, there's a lot of maths, there's a lot of precision, but then there's also just flexibility and do whatever you want.
That's right. Okay, so instead of just going through the reference and explaining every single expression, that's boring. I thought we can, as always, create some very tiny mini projects, some problems that we will hopefully then solve with expressions. And so we don't waste too much time, let's do a quick transition and go right into After Effects using this fancy new wipe I got.
Ooh.
Wow.
$10.
No, just kidding. Right, let's get started. So I have already opened After Effects, and hopefully our camera won't cover anything too much that's too important. Otherwise, I would just move it over. It's fine. And I will just start by creating a new composition, which will be probably the only one we need today. So let's call this one Stream Comp. Doesn't matter at all. Resolution, yep, that's fine. Square pixels, that's great. 30 FPS, 30 seconds long. Background color black, that's all great. So let's click OK. And there we have our first composition. Now, let's say we want to animate something, really anything. Let's just create anything at all, like an ellipse, like this. Yep, that's great. And let's just say we want to animate it from here, going over to there. So the way we usually do it is we could set perhaps a position keyframe. Oop, start from here, move forward, and move the position over. There we are. Now we have 2 keyframes, and indeed the sphere is moving over, or the circle. That's great. We can do a lot of things with keyframes, and more often than not, they will be quite useful, and we probably won't even need expressions. But sometimes, for those precise movements or repeating movements, those expressions can be quite useful. For example, let's just say we have a different shape. A circle will not be very useful, because let's say I want to rotate something like this rectangle. Let's say I want to rotate this one in a precise velocity. I want exactly, 2 rotations per second. Well, we can certainly do that with keyframes. We could go ahead and say rotation, okay. And let's see, now we have 30 seconds. If we want 2 per second, then we need to times 30 by 2, so that would be 60. And then if we go to the end, we can type in 60 rotations. Okay, that works. Now it indeed rotates twice per second, but now let's say the client says, oh no, you know what? We've done some user research. Actually, we want to have it like at exactly 1.64346 times per second. And then you're sitting there like, okay, so 30 something, not great, right? You would have to recalculate everything. You would have to mess with keyframes. It's dependent on the length of the composition. It's not great. Wouldn't it be good? Wouldn't it be cool if we could have like some way to automatically generate those rotations without us having to create random manually keyframes at the end and calculating how much rotations we actually need? And of course, since this is an expression stream, yes, of course, there's a way to do it. So let's give it a try. First of all, I will undo these keyframes, and we will have a look at this stopwatch. Because if you hover over that, you will happen to know there's a tooltip, and it says, which of course we can't see right now, so I have to zoom out just a bit. It says at the end, option click, add or remove expression. Aha, okay, right. Hold down option key. On Windows, it's the Alt key, and click. Now we will see it turns red, and we get some text over here, which at the moment just says transform.rotation. Okay, how about we type something in there, right? How about we say rotation, 90. Oh, look at that. The rectangle rotated by 90 degrees. If we say, 45. It indeed rotates to 45 degrees. And congratulations, you just wrote your very first expression. It's not a complicated one, certainly not, but it's an expression.
That. Yeah.
See, that was easy. Thanks for watching. Next week, we will talk about... Okay, let's get a bit more advanced, because obviously this is not all. You can't just type numbers. You can do much more in expressions, and let's do that right now. First of all, I would like to talk about probably the most used keyword, most used expression in the land of expressions, which is time. Time just means, if I type in time, you will see I get a menu first of all, which is very helpful later on. Time is not just a fixed value. This one changes with the with time. It's essentially just the value of seconds that have elapsed since the composition started. So after 30 seconds, time would be 30. And since we just typed in time, well, the angle indeed moves to 30 degrees. But you know what? That's not a lot, 30 degrees. Could we somehow make it faster? Well, yeah, of course. We can times it by a number. How about we just say times, oh, I don't know, 2. Suddenly, you will notice it moves faster. And if I do it even faster, how about times 100? Ta-da! Right? Now we have the angle, which is defined by time, times 100. Okay. Very interesting. Now, can we do something else with that? Yes. For example, let's say I don't really want to mess with the number down here. Because, you know, let's say I want to change the speed of the rotation. I want to make it faster or slower, but I don't always want to go down here and, oh, could it be 200? No, 150 perhaps? How about we add a slider? Because sliders are always fun. You can drag the value around, see how much you actually want, and see it update live in After Effects. So let's do that. For this, I will click on the shape layer, go to the effects controls, and now hop on over to the effects and presets. Now, just so you know, I do have some more plugins in here which you won't see, but we don't need to pay attention to any of that because all the plugins and filters and effects we need are installed by default in After Effects. And the one I want is under Expression Controls, and it's called Slider Control. So I take this, drag it all the way to the left, and now, if we zoom in, yep, indeed, we get this slider. And the reason it's called slider is because you can twirl that down, and there we go. We have a slider. We can rename that, call that perhaps velocity. And now I would like to link this number down here to that slider up here. How can we do that? Luckily, that's pretty easy. I just click in here, delete my number, and now I move over to this tool here, which is the property pick whip, or as we always just call it, the pick whip tool. The reason it's called pick whip is because if I drag it, you will see I get this blue line, which actually goes back like this if I let it loose. But I can take this, drag it all the way over here, and suddenly you will notice After Effects has added something to the expression. This wasn't there before. Let's just do it again so you can see it if you've missed it. Times pick whip. Boop. There we are.
Pick whip is just such a useful tool, just like dragging around and just placing wherever you're thinking, pretty much, isn't it?
Yeah. And just if you're interested, the pick whip essentially is just a faster way to get this, these words in here. These are not magic. I can also type them in manually because it just says pick the effect velocity, which we just named, and use slider. Interesting fact, by the way, if you rename these, this one, call it perhaps speed instead of velocity, it automatically renames it down here. So you don't need to change it all the time.
So useful when it
Very
does that.
useful.
So useful. I wish that happened elsewhere in like coding experiences because you can get in a muddle so quickly.
I'm gonna refactor this later. Famous programmer song. Right.
It's interesting, actually. Jane has said in the chat, I already know more about expressions than I ever have. And that's a sign that you're in the right place because this really is going from ground zero all the way up on, starting from nothing. And look where we are now. We're typing out expressions.
Yes. And we didn't even have to do any work for that because the pick whip is our best friend. Okay. So now we have our very first complicated expression. We have linked a slider to an expression. And now we can actually use that slider to change the speed of the rotation. Right now it's set to 0, so speed of 0 means nothing is moving. But, for example, Let's make it faster. I don't know. Let's say, right about here, perhaps. And now we have our rectangle rotating at a precise speed, which we can dial in. And notice how easy this is. I don't have to mess with any keyframes. I don't have to calculate anything. It's great. All right.
There's a question in the chat, actually. What does the star, as in the asterisk, mean for time? I'll let you explain how that's broken down, Tim.
Yep. So this down here, essentially, which I haven't mentioned yet, is it's sort of a small programming interface. I know it's not really programming, it's scripting, yada, 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 but it's programming for me, at least that's what I'm concerned. And we have some basic operations. We have plus, we have minus, we have times, which is multiplication, and we can also divide, which has some very interesting caveats, the division one, but I don't think we should get into that at the moment. This is, yeah, all right. So these asterisks just means multiply time by the amount that we have specified. Think of this part here as just a number, any number, which in this case is just 23.97 or perhaps 51.97, whatever. Doesn't matter. Think of it as just a number. So we times time by this, we get a number, and that's how After Effects knows. And time is always the current time in seconds. That's great. Could we use time perhaps in a different way? Yes, we can. So let's get rid of this one. Let's create some text. Let's say, I want a countdown, like 30-second countdown. I want to create a timer, and I want a countdown. Now, I could go ahead and type in that number. Let's say, right, 30. Make that nice color, perhaps a nice broadcast yellow. There we go. And now I could go ahead and I could cut that one down to about 1 second, and then I could duplicate this one. Try to line that up, and I could type in 29, and then I would duplicate that one. I mean, you get the idea. This would get quite annoying really, really fast, really, really quickly, so I don't want to do that. It works, yeah, sure. You can do essentially everything you can do with expressions manually, but yeah, I'm not going to do it like that. So instead, let's do it with expressions. Luckily,
there's just a couple of questions, actually, just to address before you get into that.
Go on.
So a question here of the expression language. Yes, this is JavaScript. It's actually improved over the last, I think it was 2019, there was like a big update. So technically, if you're doing this, you are doing JavaScript.
Yep.
And so yes, the way to think of what you're typing into the box is like a calculation that will provide an answer, and then the answer is what is being generated as the sort of value. And then Stefan has asked, using or creating Möbest with English expressions crash in German Premiere. Tim, we were discussing this last week. I don't know if that's something that's maybe a little bit too advanced that you'll go through.
We will do that today. We will talk about that later. We will move. We will do some Mogart fun. Yes. So I will definitely talk about that.
Right. Yes, this was a headache I had, and I'm glad to have eventually solved it. So yeah, we will get to how to fix that for you.
Okay, but for now, let's stick with the simple stuff so we can build our knowledge instead of trying to build a tower without a basement. Right. Okay, so I want to talk about how time can also be useful in different ways, and we will use our very first math expression. Right, so let's get started. I have created this text layer, and in this text layer we can see there's a property called source text. And luckily, this source text is also possible for us to add an expression. So if I option click on this, After Effects will say, yep, there you go. here's the expression. And one thing, sometimes After Effects will just flash a red warning saying like, by the way, we have briefly disabled the preview while you're editing this, but after you're done, we'll be back. Sometimes this can be solved if you just click off and on again, and now it's gone. So, just so you know, it's not a huge issue. It's not a mistake you did. It's just sometimes After Effects being After Effects, you know. Right. Okay. So let's delete this one and let's type in our expression. All right. So let's think about this. We want to count down. We want to count down from 30. How could we do that? Well, counting up is easy. I just type in time. And first of all, we have a lot of numbers. So let's scale that down. But as we can see, we start from 0, go somewhere up the line until we eventually arrive at, well, almost 30. Two issues with that. First of all, it's counting up. And second, you know, I don't really need to be that precise. The numbers before the comma would be fine. So how can we do that? Well, the first thing is pretty easy. Bit of math tells us if we want to count down, well, we should say minus. Then we're counting down, not counting up. And if we want to start by 30, we just have to offset it by 30. So we can either say plus 30, or we can just say 30 minus time. And if you think about this, 30 minus 0 is 30, 30 minus 5 is 25, and so on. So it should count down. Starting at 30, well, 29.9 really, going over to 15, 6, and finally, essentially 0. Great. First issue solved. We're counting down. Second issue, we get these numbers after the comma, which we don't want. So essentially, we just have to round this number. And this is the reason why I'm talking about this is because I want to introduce you to the math expressions in expression land. This will also be our very first function which we will use. If you have never used the function before, it's very easy. I will just type in math dot round, just put down, yep, math dot round, semicolon. We technically don't always need semicolons, but it's good practice to add them at the end of every line. And now we have this very interesting thing. What does this mean? Well, first of all, we have our function round, and this is, you can think of it like a subgroup, a subfunction of a bigger one, which is math. Math has all sorts of different functions in it. You can round numbers, you can add functions, like we can just scroll down here. And there are lots and lots of things in here, really useful, which we can perhaps have a look at in a moment. But for now, we just need the round function. And to tell the round function what it should round, we need to add an input, which is always done in those round brackets, in those parentheses. So let's take that, delete those, and get rid of the semicolon because we don't need more than one. And now this function will round whatever is inside those parentheses. And if we zoom out, hopefully, there we are. We have now rounded to the nearest integer. That's what it's called. I believe we can also round to decimal places if we just type in as a comma, or maybe that was a different function. Maybe I'm misremembering. Shouldn't do things which you haven't tried before. Right, but now we have our very first countdown, and I'm quite happy by this one because it would have taken me ages probably to do this by hand, creating all the layers manually, or even keyframes. Ugh. And let's say you want to change the color. Suddenly the client says, oh, you know what? Yellow, broadcast yellow, very nice. But we rather want a white countdown. There you go. One layer.
Single layer.
All the single layers. Don't have to do anything for that. Lovely.
Now, here's where my efficiency brain is getting on board. What happens if you change the sequence length?
Well, the interesting thing about this, of course, is since I want to make it easy, we have set this one as a constant number. So we would get into negative numbers at the end if we were to change the sequence length. However, there is a sneaky way for us to get length of the composition, which is perhaps a good point to talk about some help you can get if you are stuck in expressions. Because, truth be told, I pretend to know everything, even though I don't, because I have practiced all this before, yesterday. But sometimes, if you're stuck, you should know where you can get some help. Because you can't always call Joe, you know. You need to know where you get some help. So let's say, we don't know how to get the length of the composition. How could we find out? Well, there are two ways. First of all, there's, of course, under help, there's the expression reference, which I have open already. It's on the help X pages. And in there, first of all, you get a lovely video and some animations. But you also get all the fun expressions listed. For example, I want to learn about, I don't know. Yes, the depth of field one. Oh, yes, interesting. It returns 1 if the depth of field property on the camera is on, returns 0 if the depth of field property is off. Interesting. All right. Okay, so very cool. And perhaps we can also find out the other one. If I just search for comp, I can make my way through, see if I can find it, or I can search for length. I can make my way through that, right? But, sometimes you don't really want to scroll through a huge page of words. I mean, it's great. It has a search function. That's fantastic. But, some in-app help would be nice. And turns out there's a way, which is hidden. Well, not really hidden. It's right there. It's this play button, so to say, which, if you click on it, will show you all the functions which are available in expressions for you to use. For example, I don't know. We could try perhaps in our project. Interesting. You get some options over here. Or perhaps we can try in the comp. Probably on the comp. Let's see. Duration. Oh, how very fascinating, right? So perhaps if I replace this. I know what happened. After Effects doesn't know which comp we're talking about. So we have to tell after. This is going a bit further than I intended. But since you can have more than one composition in After Effects, since you can have as many as you want, the expressions need to know which one you mean. So we actually have to say that we are talking about this comp before, and I think this one should be
this comp.
Yeah, is it just this comp? I think it should be just this comp.
This comp with a capital C.
This comp. There we go. So this comp dot duration, and now it should work. There we go. Fantastic. And like you said, if we were to change the length of the composition, perhaps to 40 seconds or 45, I don't know, we will indeed see that the countdown now starts at 45. Lovely. Right. Okay. So this is our first expression, actually, with composition references, which I didn't plan. But all right. Okay. Great. Now,
Sorry, I didn't mean to throw the curveball there on that.
oh, I like a challenge. I like a challenge. It's all right. It's okay. Cool. Let's talk about more math or maths if you're from the US. Because that's really useful. You can't just count up and count down. You can also create perhaps some variation. Let's say we want to animate a wave, or we want to animate a circle. How could we do that? Perhaps let's start with a simple one. Let's start with a wave, because that's quite easy. Let's say I have, I don't know, yeah. Let's do a shape layer again. Why not? Let's make that here in the center. There we go. And let's say I want to move it up and down regularly, back and forth, till the end of time, without me having to create any keyframes. Right, let's do that. Take the position, hold an option, tap in math dot, and if we think back to math class back in probably 8th grade, we hopefully remember vaguely the trigonometry functions such as sine and cosine, perhaps.
Oh, you might trigger some fear among people that's already here. I'm not brave enough
no
for
calculus
maths in the
today.
comments.
But just try to think back, and you will remember that sine does create some sort of wave. And if we type in time, oh, what have we done wrong? Must be.
I always remember.
Right. Oh, okay. Yep. It's fine. Actually,
school,
another thing which I wanted to talk about. Well, let's frame it in a way that I wanted to teach a lesson. Why isn't this working? What have we done wrong? We clearly said, oh no, math, that sine time, it should move up and down. Well, what I forgot is that position, unfortunately, has 2 dimensions. It has width and height. And After Effects, of course, doesn't know how to apply one value to 2 values. Do we want them up and down, left and right, diagonally? After Effects doesn't know. So we have to tell After Effects how to behave. And we do that by using square brackets. If I just zoom in, also it tells us expression result must be a dimension of 2, not 1. Thanks, After Effects. You're the best. Right. So by adding square brackets like this, taking that here and pasting it in, we can add more than one value as a so-called array, which is just square brackets with values separated by comma. Like this. So now we have 2 dimensions. First one, comma, second. And this one doesn't have to be sine. We could also say, I don't know, 500. Any value, doesn't matter. And now we will see not a lot, because if we think back to 8th grade, we know that the sine has an output that ranges from -1 to 1, and that's essentially just a 2-pixel movement, so we won't see a lot. So in this case, we remember just times that by a number, perhaps 300, and suddenly we should see that it is indeed moving, but very, very slowly. It is moving. If I hold my cursor there, it is moving. Just takes ages. Why? Because time is in seconds. The sine function expects radians. Takes a while, so we can just speed it up. This time by adding multiplication inside the argument. So times 100. No, not plus 100, times 100. And now it should be moving. Still very slow. Oh, I think I've mistyped. Yep, I've typed plus. Great. Should be times, not plus. Now it should be moving probably quite fast. Yep, too fast.
We've got a bit of a 007 intro coming up here. Cue the music, James Bond.
There we are. Ding, 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 ding. Right. So now we have it moving. And if I just add perhaps 200 plus this, we can just move it over. Or even add 500. And suddenly we can see our sphere is moving back and forth without us having to do anything. And if you're interested how this one looks as a graph, we can actually check this one out as a value graph, however, not the speed graph. There we are.
Ooh.
And now I think this should really trigger some memories back from school or university.
Yeah, now it's looking like medical school. We've got like a what's it called? Sinograph? Sine wave? You know,
an
the
EKG
thing. You wind it up. You used to have a lot of fun messing around with those. Clearly not learning in science about those, but yeah, good little green displays. I always enjoyed playing around with those.
or an oscilloscope.
Oscilloscope, that's the one. Yeah.
No, I'm just having fun.
So yeah, I always remember in school, actually, there were multiple things, usually in maths, that was always, spoken about, and there was like a collective sort of frown in the room of like, oh, we're never going to use this. And then, of course, 10, 15 years later, you find yourself in After Effects using sin cos tan, and you are back in school and thinking, I wish I remembered, what these things did, rather than having to explain it, and likewise have After Effects tell you how to use it. But either way, it's very useful.
Yeah, there are actually some very interesting relationships between the two. For example, as we all know, if we take this, we can just add a new line. After Effects won't care, and we paste it again. But this time we switch our sine with cosine. As we all know, the Euler equation, I'm pretty sure you all know, this should produce a circle. And it does. So if you remember back to math class, then you will find some hidden gems that your math teachers didn't want you to know that you could use in After Effects.
James actually just mentioned, don't you find, though, that using maths now is so much more fun than when at school? And I totally agree. I definitely agree with that. I think it's because you're deciding how you want to use it, and it's for you. It's not for your exam. It's not for the paper. It's for you.
It's for you. Yeah. Right. Okay. Let's quickly move on, because I have two more things that I would like to talk about, and we only have 20 minutes. Right. First of all, I wanted to talk about another very important expression word or function rather that you could use, which is variables. Because sometimes you don't want to type out everything all the time, and I will show you what I mean by that. So let's create another shape layer. Let's start with a nice red. Let's duplicate that one, drag it down. I think you're already getting an idea where I'm going with this. And duplicate that one as well. Oh, no. What happened? Oh, I think I drew on the same layer. Duh.
Yeah.
That's great. Duplicate.
There's mentions in the chat of, if only we had After Effects in maths at school. I mean, the kids have it today now, but or maybe not in maths, but still having access to play around, that would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I remember my maths teacher brought in pizza one time, and it just so happened to be the day when I was off doing something else, and pizza was for teaching fractions. I think I was on like an extra sort of like Spanish class or something.
Oh,
so it came at the cost of some other lesson, and yeah, I missed out on pizza.
Bummer. Right. Okay. We can have virtual pizza, perhaps. But what I wanted to talk about now is variables. Let's say I have this traffic light and I want to give this to a friend of mine who is using Premiere, and they don't want to deal with After Effects, but they want a way so they could change it so only red is showing, only yellow, or only green. Who knows, right? And they don't want to deal with After Effects. They don't want to see any expressions. They don't care about all of that. So they ask me like, hey, could you take care of that? I just want a menu where I can select red, yellow, green, and that's it. We say, yeah, okay, of course, we can do that. And to do this, we will create our very first motion graphics template. It sounds like a lot, it really isn't. I, first of all, will create a new layer. It can be really any layer. I will, for this case, will just go, I don't know, with a null object, doesn't matter. It could also be an adjustment layer, because this one won't be visible later on anyway. And I think we could also, if we want to, we could turn this one into a guide layer, so it doesn't render anyway. Not that we would see a null object in the first place, but, you know. And on this one, we can add some controls. First of all, I would like to play around with, let's just find the effects. There they are. I would like to create a drop-down menu. If we check that one out, we can edit this one. Let's bring that over. And let's say the first one should be, I don't know, red, probably. Then, nope, not green, yellow. I wanted to go for RGB, which is of course not what we want. And green. And perhaps another one, red plus yellow. Because I don't know about the other countries, but in Germany, if it goes from red to green, it first lights up red and yellow and then green, which is interesting.
You don't want to get caught out in America where you're sitting on red and then, oh, straight green. There's no halfway point.
Okay. So, now we have our drop-down menu. It's great. We can select something, but of course, nothing is happening yet because we haven't done anything. Duh. So let's create some conditional statements. Just a fancy way to say, if this, then that. Let's open the first one, the green one as it happens. And I think the easiest way just would be to use opacity. So hit T for opacity or transparency and hold an option, click create an expression. And what we want to say is, if the drop-down menu is set to green, then have an opacity of 100. Cool thing about this is, essentially by talking through this, we already figured out how to write this. So we can say if, and I would just type this out for the moment in pseudocode, and we will replace it with a real one. If menu is green, then now we need some squirrely brackets.
This, by the way, is a great practice to see. I don't see enough people doing this, of typing as you're thinking, and then going and correcting with the actual code. Because so often you get hung up thinking like, what is the actual code? And then you go do it, and then you kind of lose track of where you're actually trying to go. So this is a good practice to see. I like this.
A bit of pseudocode is always welcome. And the cool thing about this, if you look it up online, many different platforms have pseudocode, which just is no real programming language. But if you know how to interpret that, you can adapt it to any language, in this case, JavaScript. And of course, in JavaScript, this is utter nonsense. So we're just thinking out loud. So if menu is green, then opacity is 100. Otherwise, else. Oops, sorry. else opacity should be is 0. Makes sense, right? If menu is green, set it to 100. Otherwise, set it to 0. Lovely. Let's replace it with real code. Luckily, if and else is already correct, but this one up here isn't. This, in these close brackets, this is the condition based upon which the decision is made to execute either this branch or that one. So, how can we get the result of the menu? Well, if we think back to the very first moment, we can remember that yes, indeed, the pick whip exists, which will help us to set the correct reference. In this case, I can just twirl this one down here so I can see the menu. Click in here, take the pick whip, and drag it on this. And suddenly it says, this comp.layer layer null 1 effect drop down menu control menu. Right, okay. Great, thanks After Effects. Now we can say if this one equals, and here comes the tricky part, which took me a while to learn, in JavaScript and in most programming languages, when you're comparing things, you have to type equals, equals. Sometimes even equals, equals, equals.
The way I always think of them are is equals to, is equals, and is.
Yeah, because equals often means you want to set a value to something, and we clearly don't want to set the value of this drop-down menu. We want to ask if the value of this drop-down menu happens to be the same as whatever we type here. In this case, drop-down menus work in a way that they assign a number to every menu entry. In this case, it should be green. 1, 2, 3, red, yellow, green. So if the effect is equal, then it should be 3. Now it's still not quite happy because the menu, the entire menu, it's not 3, it's a menu. A menu is not a number. How can we get the value of this menu? It's like if you ask, how many windows does a house have? You would say, you wouldn't ask like, how many house? No, you would ask, how many windows of this house? Is it equal to 3? Yeah, okay. So we have to say to After Effects, what's the value of this entry? And luckily it's pretty easy. You can just type dot value. And now After Effects should be happy. And this is always the should. And we will find out why After Effects isn't happy in a moment, I think. It says unexpected token. I don't think so. But I think it's confused by this one here. So let's move on. Thinking back to the expression from before where we added the array as an output. The way we return values to After Effects is just by using square brackets and typing the number inside. That's how you return a value to After Effects. 0. And now if we click away, yep, After Effects is happy. We have done everything correctly, hopefully. So now if we change it to green, success. It indeed shows up. Yes. Right.
There's a message from Oliver saying this is probably the first stream on After Effects that I actually understand. And also further requests to have you doing more basic teaching, because going from the very basics and doing it in, you know, the style that you have, which is so easy and pleasant to listen to, really does help people out. It's so often overlooked. Just to go too far, too deep, too quick. But this is great. Loving this.
Oh, stop it. Right, okay. Looking at time, we only have 10 minutes, so let's make this fun. And let's make this quick. First of all, if we just reflect on what we just did, we have asked After Effects if dot value. So if the value of the menu is 3, which, as a reminder, red was 1, yellow is 2, green is 3, and red and yellow would be 4, which is defined by the order in which we put them in. If it is 3, then set the opacity to 100%. And if it isn't, then just set it to 0. We don't want to see it. And actually, this makes it super easy for us to just take this, go to the next shape, in this case the yellow one, go in here, type T for opacity, option click, paste. So we have reused this expression essentially, but this time, since it's yellow, it's not 3, well, it's 2, right? Red, yellow, 2. JavaScript, unlike other programming languages, in this case, or the drop-down menu in this case rather, starts at 1, not at 0. If you're a programmer, this might be confusing at first, but this one starts at 1, not at 0.
Interesting little thing to add on that, by the way.
Yeah.
Layers in After Effects do start at 0.
Right,
so they
for
have an
optimal confusion.
Not quite sure how or why that is, but it's just a caveat.
There's a reason for that, I'm sure. Yeah. Somewhere. We just don't know it yet. Right, so paste that one more time. In this case, since this is the red one, it should be 1, since it is the first one. All right, so now, in theory, we have red, we have yellow, and, fingers crossed, yes, green. What about this one? This one, red and yellow. Oops. Well, that's not right. I don't see anything. Why is that happening? Well, of course, the number 4, which we can, if we click on edit, we actually can see the number 4. Well, no if statement is keeping that in mind. The red and yellow one, they only look at 1 or 2. And if it's not 1 or 2, well, they don't show. How can we do that? For this, we need our first Boolean operator, which is just a fancy way to say this and that, this or that, this exclusive or that, and many more. Let's think about this. When should the red light be on? Well, it should be on when I either say red or when I say red and yellow. And I think this is already solving our issue. We just need some way to say After Effects, this should be on when this happens or that happens. We need an or statement. And if you know logic operators, Boolean operators in JavaScript and most other languages, you will remember, of course, as we all know, that the or operator is 2 straight lines. I think they are called pipes.
Pipes, yep.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and add a pipe. 2 pipes, actually. So, just zoom out a touch so we can see the whole expression at once. And scroll up. Oh, do I make this bigger, I guess. There we go. And now we'll just say, I think this... Now I need to find that one. No. Oh, there we are. Double pipe. This just means or, nothing else. By the way, and is this, if you're interested. And now we can take this, copy this entire thing, and say if it is 1 or 4. The whole reason I went through this, because I remember I wanted to talk about variables, and we haven't used one, is this is quite long. You know? And it's not super easy to read, because if I am opening this expression after a long time and I don't remember what this is, like, this comp layer null 1 effect drop down, no idea. Wouldn't it be cool if we could perhaps assign this to a name that we can actually associate with anything? And yes, we can. We can use variables, and let's do that. I can just type in, I don't know, menu value or menu selection. doesn't matter. I can pick any name I want as long as it's not occupied by a function like if. I couldn't name it if. A variable called if, that's not possible. But as long as I select anything at all, that's not a function, that's fine. So menu selection equals, now notice how we're using the one equals since we want to assign something to a variable. We don't want to compare anything, we want to assign something, so it's only one equals. And now we just paste this, add a semicolon, and now menu selection is this whole thing. In other words, a number. Which means now we can just say if menu selection equals 1, we can also replace this one. Menu selection, if that equals 4, then please use 100%, otherwise 0. And I think you will all agree that this is much nicer to look at. And if we are really good, then we would add a comment with 2 slashes and just say find value of menu and assign it to menu selection. It's a good practice to add some comments. This is a comment. This won't get executed by After Effects. You can type anything you want. Very useful if you have really long expressions to comment those and add some, just some comments so you can find out what they do later on if you open this after 2 years perhaps and you don't remember.
I absolutely can't stress that enough. Commenting as you're going, even if you know what you're doing on the most basic, simplest of things, helps you, your future self. But also, if you hand this off to someone else, if I take this file off from Tim and go and do something and I have no idea what's going on, those comments will help me and maybe give me some encouragement along the way.
Nice work.
You got this.
You got this. And of course, you could go even further. You could say like, I don't know, 2 equals yellow, 4 equals red and yellow. You can add as much or as little comments as you want. I probably wouldn't do this one because I could always see it up here, but just in case.
Just to clarify, so Stuart's questioning, you can apply a comment if you add the double slash. Mm-hmm. You need to make sure it's on, in coding terms, its own line, which means it's after a semicolon. So semicolon designates that the line has ended. Therefore, whatever happens next is a new line. So double slash is the start of your comment.
Yeah, so double slashes, those are single line comments. You can see I don't have to end this one. It just ends after the first line. And if I were to type anything here, you see it's not a comment. If I want multi-line comments, that's also a possibility. Very useful if you want to comment out perhaps an old iteration of your work. For example, instead of deleting the old one, I could have saved it and just commented out the old one, which is done by doing a slash and then an asterisk, and to end it, this one you do need to end the other way around, and this is how you do a multi-line comment. You notice everything turns green, which means this one won't get executed anymore. After Effects will just skip past that one. It also doesn't impact any performance, so you can just comment out anything you want and bring it back whenever you need. Right, now, in theory, we should now, while you were talking, I have already added this one to the second, to the yellow circle, but of course with a 2 instead of a 1, since we only want to have yellow and red and yellow. Now, in theory, we should have red, yellow, green, and red and yellow. Okay. Now, quickly going to the last part, which I know I want to talk about, and I want to, or perhaps we should outsource this to another part because I don't think we can do this in 1 minute.
Oh, I mean, there's plenty of chat of asking for more After Effects tutorials and tips, and especially from yourself.
How about this? Maybe we will do this whole motion graphics template interconnection with Premiere and After Effects at a different time and dedicate a bit more time than just a minute to this, because I really think it deserves more time than just a minute. But just as a teaser, or perhaps if you are interested, there is a way, and I will just quickly tease this. If you go into the Essential Graphics, there is a really cool way where you can take all this, bring it into here, and take that menu, bring it here, export that to a Premiere Pro, and do a whole bunch of very interesting things with it that I guess we don't have time for today, unfortunately.
You can
That's
get
not an issue because
very advanced.
we have, if we look at the expressions here, I think we would have so many things to still talk about. We haven't even gone into the classic expression which everyone will use as their first example, which is the wiggle expression, which I purposely didn't do as my first example because everybody is doing that.
Mm-hmm.
They're always starting with that one for some reason. But we can go into random factors. We can play with layers. We can select layers, and yeah, it's a lot. We can create boxes based on text. And I think if we are doing another part of this series, then we should talk about some of those very useful and cool time savers. But for today, I think if you have watched the stream entirely, or if you're watching the replay perhaps, in this case, hello from the past, you should have learned that expressions can be really, really simple if you just type in a number, but they can quickly grow into quite complex effects, because imagine you having to do this manually, disabling and enabling all these circles. So this one should be quite easy. And as a last bonus tips and trick, you can now animate the menu. You can say we want to start with red and go to yellow perhaps, then to green.
I did not know this. My mind is racing now.
Then perhaps it doesn't really, hang on, I need to change this. It wouldn't make any sense. This is the other way around. In German at least, it starts with red, yellow turns on, then it turns green, then yellow, and finally, after a longer period, back to red. And now if you play this.
Amazing.
Ta-da!
I didn't know you could timeline the menu. That's brilliant.
Yeah, you can timeline anything with a stopwatch next to it.
Wow. Interesting.
And I didn't even get into loop expressions because we could loop this, and yeah, but I think this deserves an own stream.
Yeah. I think, by the way, it's worth pointing out just how valuable something as simple as this can actually be. Like, I really don't think we should underestimate how important some of the most basic tips are. I remember when I first learned web development, it started from a single 30-minute workshop that effectively just showed the difference, or the way that you connect HTML with CSS. Just that in itself led me down a massive rabbit hole, and I went and Googled everything and just went, onwards. And that was the only lesson I ever had in web development, and just ran with it. So I think, as basic as what we've shown today, I really don't think you can underestimate just how powerful a spark that can be. There's so much there. It's exciting.
Yep. And while you were talking, I already had some more fun, and I created another slider which will allow us to set the opacity of the disks when they are off, because real traffic lights, they don't disappear when they turn off. They're actually still there. So look at that. I've just created a slider where I can change the opacity of the layer when it's off. And now we have a hint of a real traffic light. Of course, also since it's
leveled up.
It's me being me, I added a glow.
Yep, there's already mentions that in the chat.
All right. But I think now we're done for real. Because I could play with this so much more and have some fun.
Yeah, this has been wonderful, Tim. I've thoroughly enjoyed watching. Even just going back over some of the basics myself. As a fun fact, I wonder if anyone can put in the chat what the expression would be for the background of my environment that has changed over time from daylight into nighttime. Maybe we can write that expression out. But otherwise, thank you, Tim, for running us through that today. We have some streams coming up for the rest of the week. So, of course, today we are Monday. We've got Tuesday, Wednesday, and I'm not actually aware of the schedule. I've just
Tomorrow it's going to be
realized this.
illustration with Rachel and Karina. They will be working in fresco, and on Wednesday, don't tell this to anybody, but we had some issues with the guests. They weren't feeling too well, so we rescheduled that one. But we're looking for a replacement. Perhaps, now that I'm thinking about it, we could do our part 2 on Wednesday.
There's an opportunity.
Maybe. Who knows? If you're interested, of course, let us know in the chat if you are interested to do the part 2 on Wednesday. Who knows? I will talk to Emma. And perhaps we will see us again on Wednesday. Who knows? But for now, for today, thank you very much for watching. Any last words?
Absolutely. No, just thank you, Tim. Thanks, everyone, for joining. We will catch you again soon.
See you then. Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.